Hello. First off, thank you for all the informative comments and things to the last video. I sort of missed a significant point in it, and that is when you have this changeover to the AD calendar, the sum of the Phoenix year numbers do this pattern of 3, 6 and 9. Now amazingly, and I cannot explain how it happens, but if you look at that Annus Mundi year dating system, it repeats that pattern. Now what I would suggest is that 526 AD calendar, the Anno Domini calendar and the BC calendar, that was then backdated, is a marker as much as anything else to show a change. If we look at the Annus Mundi dating, the first Phoenix event is in the year 4002. So we're in the realm of the 4000s. Now 4 is associated with death, it's associated with transformation. If we look at the religious story that is portrayed, the world has changed with the coming of this Jesus Christ and reflected in the BC and the AD. But it's amazing, that phenomena, the way you've got the 147 in the Annus Mundi and using the BC calendar, counting back. And both change. When it changes to the AD calendar, the Annus Mundi also changes to the 369 pattern. I just find that incredible in itself. I was asked a question by Ginger Stone, and it's like, either I've picked up on the thought wave of her question, or she's picked up on the thought wave that I've already got. So I'm hoping that's going to answer the question. Now this is something you can all do. The topic is the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. Now obviously I'm not going to be able to point to a specific tree or two trees for this as such, but we can use any tree for this. Trees are associated with knowledge. Trees are also life. Just as an amusing thought, imagine being a tree with the sort of human intellect and then looking at a human and thinking, what is that? But what is different and what is similar between a human and a tree? Well, if you look at a tree, you've got like a duality to them. You've got the roots that spread out. You've got the trunk, which is the torso of a tree. Then you'll have branches. Now they're often called limbs. And then from those you get even smaller branches. Now look at yourself. On each limb, what have you got? You start to branch out. Often when we're sort of talking about something when it's visible, we'll point to it or we'll point something out. So what are the trees pointing at? Because you imagine if a tree has got limbs, the branches, and then the little branches representing the fingers, what's the tree doing? It's pointing everything up there, and they basically form like a crescent shape, the sort of limits of the tree. It's like they're pointing at something. I would suggest that is that sky grid. They're saying, look up there, there's a sky grid. They're telling us because they know. What is the difference between a human and a tree, the real significant difference. A tree is rooted. We have two soul plates, so we can only earth. We can come into contact with the earth. This is why it's so important to go barefoot on earth as often as possible. I know a lot of you, or I hope a lot of you that listen to this channel that don't, and there is a lot probably that don't, or don't do it enough, like this one here sometimes. I'm as guilty of it as anybody else. But a tree has, well, I might look at a human and think, how grotesque, they have this mouth. But a tree has what is called a taproot. It is like the equivalent of a tongue. Now, the way a tree works, it works on tension. So it draws water up through its trunk to feed itself. When it has to economize, like when there's a drought, it will select certain branches and they will die off to protect the main part of the tree and to save itself. So even trees have to save themselves at sometimes. We're not really that different in the physical realm. We're, as Rudolf Steiner said, we're like upside down plant man. Because the roots is what, well, these are, again, it's like leaves coming out from the top of the tree. Well, where else do I want to go with this? I mean, if you were to dissect a tree and say, well, where's its brain? Where's the centre of it? If you do a cross-cut in the trunk, you'll come to that very dark bit called the heartwood. But what that tree has going through it, because it works on tension, it's constantly drawing up water. When it gets an airlock, it can be fatal to a tree because it's like if you were to get an airlock in your arteries or veins. So it would be just as lethal to the physicality. Another thing where if you look at a cross-section of a trunk, you'll see you have the tree rings. Well, we're like basically Russian dolls. We have the equivalent of tree rings. And we're like the atom in which the physical part is on the inside, because this reality is mirrored. And then you have your etheric body, your thinking body. Then you have your astral body and your eye organisation. They're on the outside, hence all that keep 6 foot apart and everything. One moment. We're back, right. Yeah, so the common factor again is water. The tree is moving constant water through itself. So it's drawing up in the water. Water contains, or is said to contain memory. It's not actually in the water, like Ken Wheeler says, but it is the currency. The information, the informed field, it flows through the water, but it can also flow through water in different states. This reality is all about getting you to externalize and to look at the outplay end of things, never going to the source. But yeah, if you were to dissect a tree, you won't be able to find the essence of it. It's no different from the essence of us. It's the size of a pinprick at the centre of the heart. It's like a little star of intense heat. What else? There is more. It'll come back to me in a minute. I mean, you look at the physicality, the human body. If you see the diagrams of the veins and the arteries, do they not resemble the tree roots? Because that is the equivalent of the tree roots. They're inside. The physical body is like your Garden of Eden. It's the fertile soil for the veins the vines to grow through, as it were. Now, here's the fundamental difference, and it is fundamental, because what your conscious mind is feeding across to the subconscious, that feeling, those thoughts, the subconscious is impersonal. It will respond, it will give you what it understands you're saying. So if you are feeling fear, if you are saying, I want, that is what the subconscious hears. That is what it will give you more of, more feeling of want and more fear, because that's how it communicates. The flowing water, we've got the equivalent. You have the blood that's moving through the pushed out through the arteries and back through the veins. It's a constant flow. But of course, if you're then putting conscious negative thoughts, you start causing blockages. Now, of course, the body will respond, because the body knows. We are always the last to know. And that saying applies to the conscious mind. The heart and the body will always know first. The body will communicate in feeling. It will send you a sensation of pain, or what you interpret as pain. For that very reason, it is to alert you to a problem in the body, which is created by our conscious thoughts. It's quite right what Ken Wheeler says about, I can't even think of the name now, the Japanese guy with 30-odd patents, and he spends a lot of the day in a swimming pool with a notepad. And I've mentioned this, sitting in a bath or in a shower, where you've got the flowing water, which is even better, rather than the still water of a bath. You've got flowing water, and it's flowing thoughts. Water, air, ether, even ice, they're all that currency of information. The first atomic number, the one that was first, is number 1. That is hydrogen, the hidden red one. That is what is in us. That is what is in water. It is in everything. This is why you can't point to the tree of life, the tree of knowledge, or anything else. But you can see examples of it, like you can see examples of the Creator. That's why we are created in the image of. Which brings me on to the answering Ginger Stone. Talk about the right hand of God as one expression of it. So if we go right back to source, now I'm going to have to use a sort of a very human mortal concept of this to explain it. But your source, you can do anything and everything. You can create anything. So you may have done exactly the same pattern as the cell that splits into two, and the source is separated into two. Same with generations as well. But obviously, sorry, with generations it's 2 creates 1, because everything's mirrored. But it's generally following the same sort of pattern of branching out. So the 1 becomes 2. Now, if we're created in the image of source or whatever, in that stage, well, we've all got this duality in us. We all have a dark side, we all have a light side, let's be honest. But it's the thoughts you create. And bear in mind, the water content of the human body, the water content of some of the organs is even higher. There's a significant interaction. So What about the left hand of God? Now we've moved down to the second state of source, as it were. So it's now become like a duality. I've described this realm as being a diagnostic zone. So it's now running a program of testing what it's created. If you can create limitless worlds, infinite possibilities, even probably with that, there would be a boredom threshold where you want to press that button, mark surprise, and actually go in to what you've created and experience what you've created, what you've dreamt up in your mind. You want to try it out, you want to test it, you want to experience it. From an immortal perspective, there's no judgment, there's no good or bad, so you want to experience everything. And if you are one in infinite forms, you can go down a negative route or a positive route, it matters not. From the outplay end, as the individual I, which is each of us, we have mortal perceptions that are based on judgments from the false personas that are attached to us and the way we're shaped and moulded in our formative years. They're called formative years for a very good reason. It's a bit like taking a lump of clay. It's described in the Old Testament as going down into the potter's house. The potter is the imagination. You can reform the clay, you can mould it into something new if it's not right. Likewise, you can change your thoughts, you can change the dialogue, the structure of the dialogue from what you're putting across from the conscious to the subconscious. Because the response from the subconscious will be just like the creator, totally neutral. It will just serve up more, it's ever loving. Of course, one thing with this physical reality, you could basically say that the Bible is the screenplay upon which everything is then played out from and externalized, because the story plays out every day. Don't be fooled to setting it in a singular time span or time frame. If you know some of the stories in it, you don't necessarily have to read it all the way through, and you certainly don't have to memorize it parrot fashion, but if you look at some of the stories in it, you can see the equivalence. If you take away the devil's in the detail of fixing it to a specific time, and within a time frame of, say, 2,000 years ago, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you take the essence of the story that is being portrayed, just like with a story, it can have different stage settings, different costumes. You can have period dramas, for example, or you can play that same story out with modern day costumes. The story doesn't change. But what is portrayed is set into a specific thing, and in this physical realm, things can only take one form at a time. It's all subject to time. So you've got this left hand of God program being run at the same time. It's a bit like, well, the world is a stage, it's a theatre show. One is playing the hero, the other one is playing the villain, or the heroine. And then it follows all those textbook, what's the word I'm looking for? The textbook sort of patterns of narcissism. The instigator will then play the part of the victim and become the accuser and point the finger at the other. There's nothing made that was not first made. There's nothing you can think of that hasn't already been done. This brings me on to another point that it sort of clicked yesterday. you've got this thing called gender fluidity. Basically, it's taking the physical and denying the physical with the physical and trying to say it's something else. Where does that come from? Imagination creates reality, where from the metaphysical you are denying the facts as presented to you by the five senses in the physical, in the external, and you're changing them. So the negative default side of things has taken that as a basis, but has now changed it into the physical, trying to deny the physical and turn the physical into something it is not, and something very unnatural. Because if you look at the pattern with this, and it's shown us this perception of the world as man is destroying the world. Excuse me. It's running this testing program, so, well, of course it's going to try and do all this, and it's going to try and shake things up. You don't have to take part in it, but there's mitigating circumstances, and again, it comes back to the water, as Ken Wheeler says. It's quantitatively pure or clean, but qualitatively it is not. We're talking about tap water here. Now, a friend of mine, Serena, who you saw in the little Swinger short video, she's got a water testing kit, and I remember she mentioned this the other day. She tested tap water, and she tested a puddle of water, and they were about the same. I think they were reading something, I think she said about 35. But the spring water in the plastic bottles, maybe that doesn't have any bearing on it, but this pure water, this mountain, whatever, from in these plastic bottles, with barcodes on the side of a plastic bottle, of course, big clue there. The reading on that came as something like 70, 75, I think she said. So the puddle was actually cleaner than the bottle, the plastic bottled water. The irony of that, because it's gone through a manufacturing process, which is probably going to be metal pipes, and because I can't see that somebody physically with a jug pouring water into thousands and thousands of bottles. It'll be done by a machine. I don't think I even need to go and prove that. You just know that it's manufactured by a process. But process, anything you ingest, you process, whether it be thoughts or food. The external is copying the natural. It's testing out the natural by pushing it to its breaking point. But the key to all this is this energy flow in water and in air, and connected to our thoughts. Nothing is separate. So whatever thoughts you implant in the subconscious not only go inside the body, they have a direct effect on everything around you, the earth itself. You wonder why the weather's so erratic. You wonder why there are earthquakes, why there are storms, why there's so much dis-ease in the weather, why things are so chaotic or appear to be so chaotic. Incidentally, I'm a bit slow on catching up. No one told me it was the Chinese New Year, the year of the water balloon, but there we go. I thought I just said that in. Yeah, so hopefully that's giving you a perspective on what this, from a human point of view, this judgmental sort of what's good and what's bad. Obviously there is good and bad, but consider also it's a diagnostic realm, and it's running an anti-nature program. But you don't have to take part in it. You don't have to take that script. You can internalize and you can rewrite. Because we're in a simulation, it's all one great big computer game after all. Just look at what the trees are showing you. They're pointing to the sky grid. They're saying, look up there, look. That information is flowing through the tree to the earth. It all comes from within. The trees are like the hairs with the roots. They're the outplay end, but they're showing. Tree hugging is another thing, very good. Wow, up to 25, 26 minutes again. So hopefully that's answered a few questions and also highlighted the importance of the internal work, being aware of our thoughts and the effect we have on the external world from what we think. The thoughts we create is what creates. We are co-creators after all. So I'm going to say love to you all, and I hope this video has really helped. And I'll put the link into Ginger Stone's video on, I can't think of the name of it, but it's another aspect on the numerology, certainly worth looking at. And it all helps in your informed field to have this knowledge, but also balanced with the realization that the intellect is like fear. They have limitations to where they won't go any higher, any further, shall we say. And it has to come from an inner knowing. The only way really to have that inner knowing is the mastering of the thoughts, because it changes the polarities within inside oneself to allow the dielectric and the magnetism to work from the heart and from the gut feeling, and the electrical circuits of the thoughts of the lower conscious mind are not putting in an interference wave across that dielectric and magnetism. It's just waiting to burst inside and reveal a lot more. It came up on a video. I sent a link about a near-death experience, and it's a good question to ponder actually. What if you suddenly saw this sky grid? Imagine it like girders, just for argument's sake, and you saw this great big sort of mesh pattern. There's no blue sky, you've just got this iron girder grid thing up there. How would you feel about that? What would you think? And now imagine someone who's not on any level of consciousness or open to the ideas of simulation or being in a construct, the effect that would have on them. So consider also what has been going on since, shall we say, October 2019. October, if you take that as the 10th month, with the 19, you know you don't count zeros, so it's left you with a 1 and another 1 and a 9. I think you can work out from that. It's basically a mercy killing. Those that are not ready are being recycled ahead because the shock would be too great. Even now, there are many that, unless they can change their polarity in some way, and this also comes down, I'll just very quickly finish on this. It's all about balance. So you've got your left-brained and your lesser number of right-brained. So the right-brained is more creative, the left-brained are more intellect and following logical patterns and things. So this is why why some can't see it, because they're on a different path. They're on the left path instead of a right path. But it also helps to be in balance between the two and see the logical, and then from that be able to explain to them a logical sequence in a language that they can understand, but always coming from the heart. You have to get to the heart of everything. So yeah, just go and look at a tree. I don't think I need to present any evidence. I think you can, or I feel you'll be able to see this for yourself, just even conceptually seeing a tree. Assuming, of course, you've seen a tree. If you haven't, then that's a different matter. But wow, we've gone up way too long now. So, love you all. Ta-ta for now.